Hey there, friends, adventurers, and game masters. I'm the Dungeon Coach, creator of DC20, and I'm here to share with you a brand new initiative system that is the default initiative system in the alpha of DC20, but you can absolutely use and steal pieces of it for Dungeons & Dragons and other tabletop roleplay games. We're going to break down each piece of this initiative system and what pieces you might want to steal for yourself or the whole thing, and give examples from a recent YouTuber one-shot that I did of DC20. It was the most recent video. I'll link that down in the description, and that show both of the moments of this in action. And I want to get you guys feedback on this after you watch this video to really see what your big stance is on it and the direction we go from here, because this is the cool thing we can do in the alpha of a game like this. I want to see the community's feedback. So of course we're going to talk about the pros and cons of doing initiative in this way, and then give alternate methods that we could possibly shift to. And if you haven't heard DC20, it's a brand new tabletop roleplay game I just released the alpha of a few weeks ago, and if you want to find out more, there's tons of videos on this channel about DC20, and if you hear that you like it, then you can check out the link down in the description and pick it up for yourself. And if you do pick up the alpha 0.4, then you also get all updates on into the future, including the big 0.5 update that's happening in a few weeks. All right, let's get into the core system of how this thing works, as different from what Dungeons & Dragons is, which is very simple, very basic, and I am purposely taking some interesting creative leaps here to see if this is cool and good enough. Basically, what we're comparing it to is the normal initiative in Dungeons & Dragons, which is roll a d20, add your agility modifier, and compare it to everybody else. Monsters roll for initiative, and everybody stacks the line up, and that is the initiative order. Done. Now, there are tons of pros and cons to doing it this way. I'm trying to keep all the pros, eliminate all the cons with this new system. So one big thing I want y'all to take a step back and keep in mind whenever I'm about to explain this is when you ask for initiative, there's that slow, clunky moment. I'm trying to alleviate that moment by having it be more creative and be a moment instead of just something you have to chug through and like, okay, numbers, okay, write them in order, okay, cool. I want to add a little bit more of a story there so that there is a role play, exploration, social encounter, whatever phase of the game you're doing. And then there's a transitional moment that actually happens. It feels like a moment that connects the story to the combat. I think that's a cool moment there. And in D&D, there's not really that moment. It's just like a chore you have to do where you make your initiative checks, put everybody in order. Okay, cool. Now we've accomplished that. Let's go. Okay, so for the first difference here is the initiative check made. Instead of just an agility roll, basically, where it's just your flat agility modifier, that's it. It is based on what you were doing leading up to the combat. Like I said, the transition from whatever you were doing into the combat, that is the type of check you make. If you were sneaking around, it's a stealth check. If you were arguing and trying to boast and intimidate the group across from you, it's an intimidation check. And if you want to get more hostile and simple with it, it could just be a simple attack check as you draw your sword and charge in, or you start to cast magic and magic swirls around you, you would make an attack check or a spell check. Whatever it is, the thing you were doing is the check you would use for your initiative check. Some clarification is that check is separate and away from anything else that you're doing. You still roll for initiative. That roll you make doesn't also count for stuff in the game, or you double use a roll. That's not the case here. A simple example would be the player characters in front of a bunch of guards trying to argue with the king or something, and one of the player characters starts the combat off by grabbing one of the guards. So as a game master, okay, hold on, there we go, we're rolling for initiative, okay, here we go. And then we go around and we would figure out what everybody's check is, because it's not just a basic one check for everything. The person that went to grab, yeah, they'd make a grapple check. Now that grapple check would be in place of their initiative. That would be what they roll. They'd make an athletics check or whatever, add their stuff. That's what their roll would be for initiative. Then we go around the table, see what everybody else is doing in this little moment, and that would be the flavor of their check leading into combat. Now, does that slow things down compared to making the same exact roll every single time? Yes, it does, but I do think it adds a little bit more of a story transition moment that's worth it. What do you guys think? From play testing, it has been cool to be able to really set the tone for the example of that combat, because in D&D, the person grabs it, roll for initiative, here we go, and that's all it would do. There'd be no story moment. The combat would then start to happen. I think it's interesting to get a pulse check of what everyone else is doing. Oh, I'm kind of sneaking over here. I'm saying this. I'm doing this, whatever. Now, also to clarify here, whenever I say that person makes a grapple check, that is for their initiative. They don't get an automatic free grapple unless I'm ruling it as some sort of surprise round where they went to grapple the guard and they get an automatic, free check in that way. If as a game master you want to do that, cool. I wouldn't do it that way. I would have them make their checks. Everybody would roll for initiative, and then we go for it. And we'd start to go through the initiative order. And when we get to that player character's turn, who said they go to grab the guard, if they then on their turn that was set by the initiative order, if they then want to grapple, sure, now we can make a grapple check. They can spend their action points. They can spend their turn doing what they want to do. But if things have changed and they go to grab and then, oh gosh, all this stuff happened, never mind, I'm doing this thing. And that's why you don't double dip checks like that. The initiative check is just representative of what they were doing in that moment. All right, so now the second thing, and a really cool thing, I think, for initiative, instead of everybody rolling initiative and then the dungeon master has to roll initiative for all the bosses, oh man, every single one, whatever, right? There's ways to speed that up, but instead of it being some sort of like contest of rolls and everyone's going one I'll add it. The player characters are rolling as a team against the enemies. And it's not a roll of the enemies, it is a DC. There's an initiative DC set by the game master for how difficult this encounter would be to go first in. Because if any of the player characters beat that DC, the player character team goes first. But if none of the player characters beat the initiative DC, the enemies go first. Then it's real quick and simple. Everyone falls in line after that. How it works for the player characters is they did establish an order based on their initiative check of who goes first, second, third, fourth. But that is first, second, third, and fourth for their team. And how it works is the teams go back and forth. If the player characters, let's say they won and someone rolled higher than the initiative DC, that one of those players, whoever rolled the highest, they would go first, then the enemy team, then the players, then the enemies, back and forth, truly giving across the back and forth feel of how combat should feel. We all know, and we've all had the initiatives where all the player characters go first, or all the bad guys go first, or there's a huge block where there's multiple. A lot of times that makes fights really clunky or really swingy in one way for the other, because if all the player characters go first, the entire combat's different, and the entire combat could be an absolute joke. Or the opposite's true, and you could have a TPK in your hands of everyone. Oh gosh. This back and forth rule prevents that, and you can still have players go together in initiative if they roll the exact same number, which is a really cool moment. Now they have a shared initiative. And there's also a rule where you can delay your initiative. I do that in Dungeons and Dragons too. If somebody wants to delay their initiative to go after or before an enemy or something like that, they can do that, so then they can go the same time with their ally. Now that's how the player character side works, to establish who goes first, second, third, however many for the player characters. But for the enemies, there is no initiative rolls. The Dungeon Master doesn't have to take any time rolling dice behind the screen. They got plenty of stuff in their hands to be able to about to manage a combat with however much stuff they have to juggle. They don't have to roll for initiative, because when it's the enemy's turn, the Dungeon Master on the first round of combat gets to choose who goes next. Now that choice can be inspired by tactical gameplay of like, this person needs to go first to be able to buff this person or move here or whatever. It could be inspired by tactics or inspired by roleplay or a mix of the two. I have loved doing this, and the combat's become so much more cinematic. This is just the way I run initiative now, because I've ran a combat before where it was like a rival enemy team versus the 4 player characters, 4 on 4, and whoever they went to attack, and they're like talking smack and they're attacking this one character. Guess who goes first? Guess who I choose if they attacked this enemy? Guess who I choose narratively to go next for the enemy players? That one. So whichever one gets engaged with the most, whichever one has the most narrative cool, makes sense to go, that person can go. And I had, in this hypothetical example, I had the 4th secret person. They were hiding in the shadows. They were in the dark. The players didn't know where this person was, and I wanted this person to go last. So narratively, I chose for them as the Dungeon Master to go last. So the entire first round of combat, they're like, "Where's the 4th person? Where's the 4th person?" And sure enough, at the very last one, the very last chance I had, I revealed them from the shadows. So that's how it works for both sides. Player characters have an order based on the initiative that they rolled, trying to beat the DC to see who goes first, and the enemies, the Dungeon Master actually chooses them. Now, and second, third, fourth, and next rounds of combat, that is the order. The Game Master can't just shift around and choose and flip-flop them all over the place. That would be broken for lots of other reasons, but as soon as that first round of initiative passes, that is the initiative, it is set, and we move on. So is the system slower from how you roll initiatives and you get to choose, and it's kind of a little moment? Yeah, that slows it down. But this second part here, it really speeds it up. Because if you think about it, as the Game Master, I say roll for initiative, we talk about whose rolls are what, they make their initiative rolls, I start doing stuff behind my screen, getting ready for the combat. I don't even care what it is, I just care who rolled the highest. Oh, you did, and you beat the DC or not. And then I still don't care who's next. I don't have to ask, okay, who's next? What are the numbers? What? It doesn't matter. I know who's going first, and I know if the enemies are going first or not, and we go right into it. And then I say who's next, and the player characters can figure out where they are in reference to each other, and that's how I do it. Figure out y'all's initiative, who's first, second, third, fourth. They figure out their team's order, and then I can keep going and doing my own thing. So let's say they win. I know who goes first. They go, and then I have an enemy go, and like, who's next? And then that player goes. Now I'll write that person's name down to see who goes next, and then I'll decide who goes next for my team. Boom, there we go. That's how the system works. Now I want to show you guys a real example from a YouTuber playtest that I did of DC20 with 4 other YouTubers. You'll see them on the screen and stuff. Super fun, and I'm going to show a little clip of the combat, because the biggest thing that people are going to be weirded out by or different is the initiative checks being different and based on what you were doing and having that thematic moment. Because this moment that happens between the story happening and then stop combat, this moment that happens in between there is a little different for people. It's new. I've gotten feedback that people like it and people don't like it, so I want to show and really clarify what that should look like, so that if people are playtesting this and want to try it out, they can do it the right way, or at least avoid things that make it feel weird and clunky. Then I want to get you guys feedback to see if you like it or not, and we'll get to that in a second. Time out. When you roll for initiative, you're about to have some combat. And where does combat happen? battle maps. Perfect segue for the sponsor of this video, Champeku. Champeku have over 4,000 hand-drawn fantasy maps. You can see it all here. And I really want to show you guys something that happened during a live stream. It was crazy, just the inspiration that comes from these maps. If you go to explore maps here, you can see for yourself. Go to theme. First of all, just look at these maps. This spiral staircase leading down this forest with, oh my gosh, this forest village. Anyway, I'm getting distracted here. If you go to themes here, they are all sorted and categorized by these themes. And if you join their Patreon, you get access to so many of these maps. They have different reward tiers. Check it out. But this one happened during a live stream. I went to Cold Snap. I wanted to make a one shot for a cold themed one shot, and I had no inspiration coming into this. I was just trying to come in blind. And within seconds, I saw this map with a frozen dragon in the middle of a lake. Oh my gosh. And I am going to create a one shot of a frozen Draco Lich that's trying to be brought out of this lake, almost like Game of Thrones style. You know when they were pulling the dragon out of the water? Yes, that's what's going to happen. There's going to be some sort of rituals trying to bring this dragon out of the thing, and the player's got to stop it. That one shot spawned into existence entirely because of Champecu's amazing maps, and it gets better. Check it out. These maps have different iterations. A blood version just got way creepier and way more Draco-like. Maybe this is the map I use. Or if you want to get more fiery, now it's lava. And you're in the middle of a volcano as an ancient fire dragon that was in its own lava. Oh my gosh. Or maybe you're next level game master, and before the ritual starts, there's nothing there. And it's just an empty blank space with super innocent little canyon. Oh, wait a second. There's a dragon that also has multiple stages of development and excavation. You can do so many things here. Even this. What's going on? Oh my God. I never even saw these. You can do so many different things where just a blank canyon and they slowly start digging it up. Get out of here. And then there's this one, which is just sick. So check out Champeku in the link down in the description and get some inspiration for your one shots. Or I've also done it where I have a certain map that I really need to have, and trust me, they got it with 4,000. You'll be taken care of. So check them out and show them some love. And with all this battle map talk out of the way, let's get back to initiative. All right, here's the example. I'm gonna give you guys the insight of what you would need to know leading up to this, and then I'll run it through as a game master, and we'll talk about it after as well. So here's the map down here of what each player was, and I'll show you who was who. Barbarian here, who is Bob in the corner right here. He's in this top corner, and they were about to fight 4 suits of armor. They did not realize these 4 suits of armor would animate and then fight them. And leading into it, they're like, oh, we're just going to kind of attack the armor and show off some of our skills that this character was asking them to show me what you got type situation. So leading into it, they described things they were doing, and that is what happens. That's what their check is leading into it. I love it. Let me see. I want to know what you think, though. So this barbarian described drop kicking the suit of armor. There we go. That's what he was doing. So, okay. The tree up here in the corner is a treant played by Treant Monk. There we go. He described himself as just being a tree and holding in a tree pose for some other flavorful roleplay bits, because he had no idea that this, and you can even see the mini right here is leaning up against them. That was a funny moment we described. Duke here is playing this lightning dragonborn wizard situation, and he described some cool whip flair with some lightning crackling around his whip and attacking the statue that came to life after. And then the 4th player here, Luke right here, is playing this cleric who just described themselves healing this NPC ally to kind of show how powerful their healing magic was after they also attacked this little NPC, but that's a whole nother story. So let's see how this looks, then we'll break it down after. What we're gonna do is roll for initiative. Your initiative check also is the thing you were doing right before combat happened. So for Bob, give me an attack check. That's going to be your initiative check is going to be an attack check. This way you are drop kicking. Same for you, Zephyrix. You're going to be an attack check / spell check, depending on like the whole breath action situation here too. But attack, I think you said whip first, so attack check. And then Sally, definitely it's going to be a spell check for you doing this little like attack heal move here at the beginning. Boom. And then then we have Stout Trunk. I love this. What the hell check is Stout Trunk going to make? He's going to make a nature check. Give me, oh my God, did you say nature?
That's what I said.
I love it. Yes, we're so synced up. Yes, give me a nature check for your initiative check. Is how comfy of a tree are you right now? There it is. Super simple and flavorful, I think, based on what they were doing. And you get some really interesting and I think funny in this case moment with someone describing that they're doing something funny. I ran this one shot in another way in a play test, and somebody was describing going off and looking for that NPC that they couldn't find before. So they're going into combat. Like what they were doing going into combat was an investigation check looking for something that had nothing to do with the combat. So the whole point is it's flavorful based on what you were were doing, and I think it does tell a little bit of a story and have some potentially funny, potentially interesting, bad, good, moments leading into combat. Sometimes that might lead to inefficient rolls made by your character that was doing something that they don't have a good check for, or in the case of a tree who does have mastery in nature, they get a good initiative roll based on a nature check, and it's a funny moment. Either way, there is a moment that connects the exploration and story part of the game to the combat in a smooth way. Now, in the example, I ran through each of them because they've never done it before, but in general, in play, when people do know what's going on, a lot of times you don't even have to walk them through it. They'll know what their checks are. Like, everybody got their checks, and then they make them. How this might look when you have veteran players that are used to the system is like, my initiative was an attack check for a 12. My initiative as a tree was a nature check for a 13. My initiative check with my divine healing for an 8. So this is an open and collaborative moment between players choosing whatever their check is and the game master helping them, and the game master deciding if that actually makes sense. Because you might get some players that are trying to like game the system by always doing a certain check that they're really high in that doesn't really make sense, and that's kind of another thing that kind of shake people out of it. But that's another thing for the game master to keep players honest with what actually would make the most sense for which type of check you should use. Because overall, if one character has a really suboptimal roll, I've even had this, someone decided like, I didn't even know anything was happening. I'm just gonna make a flat D20 roll. My character was completely unaware. Cool, that's fine. They just make a flat D20 roll, and it doesn't hurt the overall group because you're trying to beat the initiative DC. So yeah, that player might go later in the order of the player characters between each other, but at least no one's held back over for the group overall. Now, another clarification point that happened in this example is 2 of the player characters described attacks towards these suits of armor. Now, these were suits of armor. They were sitting there, mundane, no idea that these things were about to attack them, and they described attack checks against them. So, as a game master, I ruled that that would be a surprise round. It makes sense. They literally attacked the things before they animated. So, that was the initiative roll. Everybody made their initiative roll, and then I said, all right, actually, let me show you. I am, because you guys said that y'all were doing this thing to start the combat, the 2 people that made attacks are going to get those attacks for free in a little mini surprise round situation on this, because y'all did make those things to set this thing off. So not knowing that these suits of armor were going to animate and fight, y'all do get a little bit of a jump here. So in the little mini surprise round, Dwayne, give me an attack check. This is going to be a drop kick. You're not using your boulder gauntlets, so I'm going to just say this is going to be a 1 damage type situation for your drop kick. And then you are making an attack with your whip, Zephrix, so go ahead and give me an attack check there. So this also showcases that their initiative checks did not also double as their attacks. They are separate because you don't want to get that too clunky. That was their initiative roll. They made it cool. Here's the surprise round. Make your attack against and make your attack. Think of the initiative check as the flavor representation for what you were doing. There's that. Now this little mini surprise round, I asked them for new attack checks based on the surprise round that I ruled as the game master that they deserved. Now I want to ask you guys, what do you think? I'm about to go into the pros and cons, so please listen to the pros and cons so you can have a real full big picture before you go here. But in the description is going to be a Google Forms for what you think of this and giving feedback in this little moment here. I really am interested to see this. I'm going to wait about a week or so to be able to go and check other results of that. And I want to see what people think of this initiative because it is a little bit out there. I'll have it open for the whole month of December, then I'll check it at the end and see if we want to, what kind of direction we want to shift and change things are. There are going to be variant rules. So if you're worried about like, oh, this is a little bit, I just want to have normal, there's going to be variant rules of different ways to run initiative. There's a bit more streamlined or simple or what you're used to. I just want to know what y'all think about different parts of this and get feedback from the overall community. And you can check the link out in the description. All right, now get into the pros and cons. First up is the whole initiative, what the role is. I know that a D20 plus agility would be very simple. I do think that that gives a little bit more importance to the agility stat, which overall in D&D, dexterity is the god stat. It's the most powerful. It's broken. I think in DC20 that is definitely not the case. It is much more in line with everything else. And if we did give agility this initiative thing, I think that might be even a good thing for agility. It might give it a little bit more importance in this situation, but I overall just necessarily don't like the agility being tied to initiative so strongly. But I could be wrong on that. So a pro would be that it's very simple to do, and whenever I say roll for initiative, everybody just does it. Then again, a con of that is it then falls into like a chore category that everybody kind of has to do, and is it more important? Is the storytelling aspects of flavor based on the thing you were doing, is that worth the extra time it takes to do that? In my experience playing it, I'd say yes, because there's been so many times where that moment that happens between the storytelling and the combat, things happen during that moment, set the tone for the combat. I've had people say things in roleplay during this little window because they wanted to make an intimidation check where they started role-playing against one of the NPCs, and that started a dialogue that lasted through the whole combat. There's been really funny and unique moments where someone's stuck under a boulder and we get to think of what would your initiative check be while you're under a boulder. We actually ruled that it was a might saving throw to be under the boulder to see how that whole thing would go. Because it's all based around an initiative DC that's set and the Dungeon Master can make as hard or as difficult as they want. Which brings me to another pro of the system is I love the initiative DC to be able to choose that and have that be set as a game master of how difficult it would be to go first in this combat. You're about to fight the BBEG, that would be a high DC, and if you roll a natural 1 for the BBEG, okay. It also eliminates rolling from the Game Master. I think the second part here is where a lot of the benefits shine, and I really love the back half of the system of the alternating teams. The Game Master doesn't have to roll for each and every single enemy that they have. They get to choose narratively or tactically which one goes first. You can also choose to group similar enemies together. So if I was running a combat as a Game Master and I had an Orc Shaman, some Orc Brutes, and a bunch of Goblins, I could group those together as 1, 2, and 3 different groups, and I can choose between the players when to interject them in. Or maybe instead as a Game Master, if I was just running only orcs and there was just 4 orcs and that's all there was and there was 4 players, I could choose for those 4 orcs to go all together. But in this situation, I might have them go alternating and just go back, forth in a back and forth field. Or I could group 2 of them together and then 2 of them together so that 2 players go, 2 orcs go, whatever. But I have that creative freedom as the Game Master to get across the field in combat that I want. And you can make that choice on the fly, both how you choose to group your enemies together and who goes first. Now, some alternative options here that are floating around in my head is to just have everyone make a prime check. In DC 20, your highest attribute is your prime attribute, and that could just be your initiative. So everyone would have the same modifier to their initiative that would scale as they level, just like the prime attribute does. And it would just be their highest attribute, they add it to their roll, and you can be as flavorful as you want with what's happening. You can have a story moment or not. If you want to just get it done, you roll the D20, add your prime modifier, everyone's prime's the same, and it essentially just becomes a D20 roll plus that modifier, and you're trying to beat the DC. Or if you want the actual attributes to connect and matter and maybe give a little bit of love to the agility attribute, then the agility one should be. And the one elephant in the room here, as far as the concern that people have voiced the most, is what if players are just super optimally trying to always do stealth and their players are always, I'm gonna sneak away in the shadows, I'm gonna sneak away, I'm gonna sneak away. First of all, these types of problems are usually solved by just talking to that player. And if I had a player that was uncreatively, very optimally min-maxing, trying to only ever do this check even when it makes no narrative sense whatsoever, I would just talk to that player. If you can get them to buy into the overall concept of the story connection here, yeah, sure. And if they did try and use a stealth check in a situation that made no sense, I would call them out on it and be like, okay, I really don't think that's fitting here. That's also where me as a Dungeon Master goes into the headspace of bonus level up perks and giving players perks and upgrades whenever they level up or between level ups based on what they love. And this player apparently loves initiative, so maybe you give them a bonus level up perk on, they get advantage on initiative checks, no matter what it is. But overall, through play testing, I have found this is nothing but a fun little moment here that I do think is worth it. Now, it might be different in the course of a campaign. In the sake of one-shots, usually they're more built up to be these big moments that happen before combat. Maybe it would get clunky in a campaign where some combat happens in some weird situation. Or maybe if the story doesn't matter as much in the situation, it's just some little thing you want to get out of the way, then I would also, at that point, why are you having a combat in this way? And that should be a combat skill challenge, which I've also done a video on. I'll link that in the description. And that's where we'll end this big overall topic here of initiative. And what do you think? Check out the poll down in the description if it's still during the month of December, and if it's not, drop me a comment. I've absolutely been blown away by the love and support that people have had for DC20. I want to hear that feedback and make some adjustments and changes, and I fully plan on also having multiple variant rules to be able to adjust for multiple different kinds of playstyle. So until next time, stay creative, think outside the box. Peace.